But that look in Moika's eyes, though. There, again. To the ends of the earth, of the universe. Come on! She came back. Okay, Amane Susaha. Oh, she ran to go turn it on. The claymore. Wow. Of course, as expected, he jumps to it, given the chance. Incredible opening, exhilarating, hopeful, uprising. Wow, Amane Susaha. Clutch. Okay, so first ever on-screen time leap, right? I always have to make sure to say, you know, for me, because these kind of things can always be at play. Again, time travel narrative. Day 1, episode 1. So, I mean, how about that? Again, you know, the visual indicator of the time leap, it's kind of similar to reading Steiner, but not quite, right? Some similarities, but a bit different, just a bit different. But that leading into the opening, masterful. The whole opening, one of the best. Ooh. Okay, the clock's running. Ah. You don't want to go like that, Mayuri. You don't want to reunite with your grandma in that manner. He saw it. He understood. Oh. You have much to live for, Mayuri, here on Earth, in the world. Wow. 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 August 13th, 4:56, did it say? Yeah, man, that's... Now, Makise should be able to put something together here, right? She's done it before. Yeah, look at his demeanor. Okay. Okay, no, his demeanor is just bizarre for them, from their perspective. But Ruka never came. Okay, come on, Makise. There. I think she just clocked it. I can't believe this is actually happening at the moment. Time leapt. Okay. Just out of grasp.
世界線が変わっていないということは、マユリ自身の行動は俺が何かをしない限り変わらないはずだ。
That bit's for the audience as well, to kind of, you know, really reiterate that it didn't change. The elusive Ferris, all of a sudden.
マリカ、上司か、今日はもう解散だと言っただろう。早く帰って。
The brilliant Makise, though it's kind of right, it's right there. Good, good. But maybe you should explain, man. I guess time's running out, but... Ah, the first star. Huh? It's already dark. Of course. I feel like I've seen this exact shot before. I have. Yeah? Yeah? I'm not saying it's the exact same scene, but the setup of it. Oh, okay, Okarin, you've got to take a bit of a different approach here, man. You're coming off a little... But again, man, there's no time. Necessity demanded it. She always puts her trust in Okarin. Always. Wow, look at that. I'm dreading a really distinct possibility, a really likely possibility, but let's let it play out. This is a possibility. He just got away? They let him go? Okay. A little bit earlier. Bit of a different approach. It's reflected in the score as well. It's a bit better than last time. There's that too. It might be destined, a fixed point in time. That was a thing I was kind of fearing. I've seen that. I've experienced that in a couple of time travel narratives before. He tried, it changed a bit, but she died anyways. Kiri Moeka. The phone matches her eyes. Yeah, it's going into that territory now, man. Reliving a moment. Almost as if you're cursed to relive a moment. Hey, Fubuki-chan. Better? Of course. She's noticing again. Something off about him. Oh god. If she gets run over. Yeah, see, there's an interesting dynamic at play here as well. I thought Moika's about to run her over again.
あれ、マユシの懐中止まっちゃってる。おかしいな。さっきネジ巻いたばっかりなのに。その代わり、終わったら全部聞かせてほしい。
Again, puts her trust into Ocarine. Absolute trust. Always.
約束する。
ごめんね。オカリンの力になれなくて。ごめんね。
Oh, the sound design. Hey.
いつか
Nai?
必ず。
Oh god. Again.
お姉ちゃん。
The universe demands it. Fixed point in time. It's fated.
私、お姉ちゃんをびっくりさせ
Oh my god, look at that. Traumatized for life.
殺させない。マユリは俺が助ける。
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I've seen this before. Many times. It's a fixed point in time. Like I said, cursed to relive the same moment. That moment of losing Mayuri over and over again. Me as well. Right? It's the one thing I don't want to see. Mayuri dying over and over again. Yet, here I am, right? Ocarina and I together. I'm pretty certain maybe there could be a shift, a turning point, right? A unique breakthrough, but I'm pretty certain he could try for eternity and Mayuri is always going to die, right? That's an incredibly heartbreaking thought. Wow, man. Yet another incredible episode. This is the anime, man. This is the anime. Man, I'm telling you, this is already firmly, on the road to becoming an all-timer for me. An all-timer anime. And again, even beyond anime, just in general, it's just something that I'm really quite attached to at this point. And I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I've been into it since day one because, yes, of course, it's right up my alley, right? But since then, the stuff I've experienced in these 13 episodes, yes, it's special. It just is, right? Again, it's a matter of preference as well for many people. To others, it might not be special. But 13 episodes in, I can sit here and claim that this is a special show. This is a special anime. And just as a whole, man, the package, the tone, the subject matter, the premise, the characters, it's for me. It just is. And yes, of course, I do have about half the season still left ahead of me, right? But, this is how I feel at the moment already, right? So, I don't know, man. If it just really, truly fumbles at some point, in these upcoming episodes, leading up to the ending or something, then maybe it might be knocked off this trajectory. But, right now, this is just, this is just one of my favorite things in recent memory, quite easily, And right there at the end, as, they kind of give us a tight shot. As it zooms in on the numbers, you see that indeed it does begin to go backwards, right? So a confirmation of Okarin's second major declaration in this episode, right? That he'll save Mayuri. No matter what, he'll save Mayuri. And again, the implication of the time code going backwards, meaning he's committing. He is committing to this hell, right? The time loop. And in the end of that episode, I said that I'm pretty certain that, he can attempt it for an eternity, but every single time, Mayuri is going to die, right? This loop that he's committing himself to. And, the crazy thing about that is this man, he'll do it. He'll keep at it. He'll keep going. No matter how long it takes, how many attempts it takes, he'll go. He'll go as long as he can, right? As long as his mind is going to allow it. As long as, his psyche can hold up. He'll go forever if he has to. There's simply no other choice for him, right? There's no other choice he wants to make other than this, right? Other than putting things right, other than saving Mayuri. And just the thought of that is incredibly grim and heartbreaking. For me as well, man. Because I'm not trying to see Mayuri die over and over. I mean, I saw it a couple of times and that's more than enough, man. I don't need to see it again, but I'm pretty certain I'll be seeing it again. I'll get to see it again many times. I mean, how's that for penance, for punishment, right? Cursed to relive your childhood friend's death over and over and over, right? Because you feel that that's the only choice that you can make here and want to make here, right? There's no other option to Okarin other than, I've got to save Mayuri. I simply have to, I can't just give up on it. No chance. Now, even though I do believe that Okarin is capable or is going to be at it for eternity if it takes that long, right? Again, if his body and mind allow it, I do think at some point, the ensemble cast is going to play a part as well, right? I mean, even in this episode, I was hoping that he does talk to them, that he does talk to Makise Kurisu, right? Makise Kurisu actually plays quite a integral role just in this episode as well. That call she made, right? Just that alone, it is able to kind of calm Okarin down just a bit, right? Ground him just a bit. That, on the other end of that phone call is someone that does understand. First of all, she clocked it, that indeed the time leap has been used, right? And this Okarin has memories from the future Okarin's memories, right? So there's that. And then, of course, there's the demeanor, the calm demeanor of Makise Kurisu, right? Because she understands this man is going through something right now, and then some, right? Because that's the only way that he's going to all of a sudden change his mind about using the time leap after, deciding as a group, right? And it being his idea to begin with that they're not going to experiment. Yet now, all of a sudden, it's clear to her that indeed he has time leapt. And, if that's the case, something terrible has happened, right? That has pushed Okarin to this point. The situation demanded it, ultimately. And the situation presented itself in perhaps one of the most exhilarating openings, one of the most, goosebump-inducing and hype moments, right? To see Amane Suzuha launch back in there, the element of surprise on her side, and in addition to that, turning on the 42-incher down below, right? So, it's a clutch move by Amane Suzuha. And it's quite a deliberate one as well, right? She understood. I don't think she just randomly, ran out, That was a calculated move as well, of course, as difficult as it might have been at that point, difficult choice. Like I said, might have been the most difficult choice of her life. I don't think she ran out in a state of panic, right? Emotions must have been high, but not in a state of panic, in the sense that, she doesn't know the next steps, right? I just kind of assumed she'll be around. Maybe she'll tail, the people that are taking them, right? Something along those lines. Or, again, her being a time traveler is going to come into play big time, perhaps. But no, she got out of there in time before they can spot her. so she can make it down there, right? Mr. Braun's shop. And, I'm guessing she has keys. So she'll go right in, not much noise, and turns on the 42-incher, makes sure that it's ready to go, right? So this kind of, reiterates that idea, that notion that indeed Makise Kurisu understood, and she knew the things that are about to happen up there. And again, that includes that significant turning point, that pivot of Mayuri dying. Now I'm even more convinced she knew about that. And that makes it even... I knew it's a tough choice already for her, but now knowing that she most definitely knew about Mayuri's death, that makes it even more of an intense moment in that last episode. Her having to make the choice to not continue, telling them, right? Cut off midpoint, mid-sentence, and apologize and get out of there. But wow. That is, I'm happy. I'm happy that it's finally time for Amani Suzuha to shine. She is indeed a full-fledged warrior, and damn impressive as well, right? And she gets to show us. She gets to show all of them, and Okarin as well in that case. But it's not about showing off or anything. It's all about taking your chance, right? Taking your moment, that opening, and she provided that opening. And both Makise and Okarin jumped to it, and as expected, if given the chance, Okarin is going to utilize the tools that he does have, right? And that includes D-mail and time leave. And of course, in this high stakes, explosive situation that's on a knife's edge, it had to be the time leap. The time leap fits like a glove in this situation. It sends him back a couple of hours, or, they program it to send him back a couple of hours. And, that is a key component as well, because he cannot go too far back, before the inception or the confirmation of the time leap being ready, right? Because then by overshooting, you essentially kind of doom Mayuri, right? I mean, it feels like she's doomed anyways. And I feel like it'll continue like that for a long time. But there's a story at play. There's a time travel narrative at play. So yeah, like I said, it feels like that, he can go and do this and run it back for an eternity, but every single time Mayuri is going to end up dying, because this truly feels like one of those points in time, a fixed point in time. It's fated, it's destined, or maybe in the case of this anime, right, you could use a different term, convergence point. I think I brought that up back in episode 1, right? Just the depiction of the world lines as the power lines, and, every now and then, all of those lines converging to that one post, I suppose, but to that one point. But let's not forget that there's another element of this that appears to be a bit of a constant as well, right? Okarin is in a position to actually retry it. And you have to assume that he'll be able to retry it every single time from this point on as well. That's interesting, really interesting, because, you saw my reaction. I was rather surprised that they let him get away. That he got away. Now, I'm not saying, that for sure it's because they let him go, right? But he does get away rather easily, And not only that, he made it back to the lab and immediately just locks in, right? And time leaps again. Now, I think you would just have to assume, of course, it's a given that the 42-incher is on downstairs. Otherwise, it's not going to function. He's not going to time leap again. But, this is another iteration of it. And there's no Amani Suzuha here to turn it on for them. So I don't know, there's something missing there, but I have to assume it's on. It has to be on, right? It's not even an assumption. It's a given. It has to be on for the time leap to function, or for, the D-mail to function. I mean, the time leap mechanic has the D-mail aspect built in as well, right? Because it's part of the functionality of it. I mean, it could be something as simple as the door being unlocked to Mr. Braun's store, and, Okarin is essentially allowed to run right in and turn it on, right? It could be something as simple as that, right? But but you still have to kind of look at the reasoning for the door being unlocked, right? Then that kind of sends you tumbling down another rabbit hole. But again, this is just speculation. I'm not even sure if it is that, right? The door being unlocked. So I don't know, it could be the cuts, but they made it seem like he got there and he immediately just locked in, you know, after, you know, ditching the goons that caught up to him and Mayuri. And then unfortunately, Moeka, Kiryu Moeka, runs down Mayuri. And this time, you know, it's quite a deliberate attempt to kill her as well, right? Yes, even last time, it's a deliberate kill shot to shoot her. But I don't know, just something about running someone down in a car, you know, being ready for it. Yeah, I don't know, man. But see, something else happened in the next iteration. I thought, okay, Moeka is going to be responsible for her death again, and that might be a constant in all of these attempts, right? In this loop, over and over again. But no, it's not. It actually ends up being a chance thing, right? Air quotes, of course, a chance thing, because ultimately, you know, it's something that is always going to happen. You might be able to change a few things. You know, you might be able to delay it for a time at least, but ultimately it still arrives at that conclusion. And that conclusion is the heartbreaking death of Mayuri. And of course, in this iteration, it's just such a bizarre chance thing as well. Nai, of all people, ends up getting Mayuri killed. Now, you know, that might sound a little bit harsh, but, you know, her tripping up and falling into Mayuri and pushing her just at that moment. Not pushing her. You know, I'm not trying to blame Nai. Let me just establish that. There's no blame on Nai, right? None. It just happened. It just happened. But the thing is, it's something that needed to happen, that has to happen. So unfortunately, it had to happen through Nai in this iteration, right? And you see Nai, that shot of Nai, and just even the voice acting, traumatized for life. That is something that child can never, ever forget about for the rest of their lives, right? But again, you know, Ocarine has committed to running it back, running the loop. So of course, you know, him running it back can potentially mean that, you know, she's not going to grow up with that. And that possibility, that component kind of brings out this interesting possibility, right? And I've been kind of thinking about it, you know, during the episode as well. But, you know, I thought, okay, I'll save it for this, of course, because it requires a lot of just, you know, talking it out loud and see if I can kind of figure it out for myself here. This idea of the timeline, the world line now shifting, right? There's no reading Steiner. None of that happened for Ocarine, right? And ultimately, you know, from that perspective, nothing has changed. The only thing that's happened is that memories of the future have time-lapsed back to that Ocarine, a copy of those memories, right? And let's specify that because Makise specified that as well earlier. Not here, in the last episode, right? And, you know, the 48-hour limit and all of that. Because I think at the most basic level, gaining these memories of the future doesn't immediately change anything, right? You just have these memories. Nothing has changed until you act on it. Act on the information that you are given, provided from the future, memories of the future, right? Once you act on it, as Ocarine does in this episode, it changes things. It begins to change things, right? But again, you know, there's no signs of reading Steiner and him shifting to another world line, right? Because he's the one who's already in it at that point. But see, there is something I'm kind of hung up on, and it might kind of serve as a roadblock in any potential speculation from that point on. But these are memories, a copy of Okarine's memories, and recent memories at that have been sent back to an Ocarine, you know, in the past, a couple of hours ago, right? So memories, not consciousness. But if it's not the consciousness, does that mean that consciousness still exists in the timeline that those memories are sent from, you know? And that timeline being, of course, you know, right after Mayuri got shot, and then Amane Suzuha came in, gave them the opening, they took the chance, and unfortunately, right before time leaping, he sees Makise Kurisu die again, take a shot, get shot, rather, right? So that's twice now. Now, again, I'm not 100% sure if she died, you know, right after that first shot, but he sees it. That's the second time he's seen Makise Kurisu bleed out or be in a situation like that. Essentially seeing her die twice, or seeing her dead body twice even. So it's got to be such an incredibly jarring and fucked up thing to arrive back, or gain those memories back and see Makise Kurisu once again standing in front of you, right? Deja vu. Much like earlier in the series, he sees a ghost, or so he thought, right? But it's not a ghost. It is Makise Kurisu, whose hair you're running your hands through, my friend. It's not a ghost. You just shifted into a different timeline, right? So crazy, man. You kind of have to give Ocarina a bit of credit here. I'm not going to hold it against him that, he didn't immediately, talk to them and sit down, be calm about it, and, just come up with a plan of action. That could happen, right? And I hope it happens. And, I am expecting that to happen soon enough, hopefully, because I'm expecting, you see Makise has already stepped in. At least in the first iteration, she understood that, okay, he has time left. So, something is at play now. Something, of course, tragic could be at play. And she made him promise, as, please make sure to tell me. You've got to fill me in once you get a chance, right? And again, like I said, that does kind of help calm Ocarina down a bit, to have that, to have Makise in his corner. So, I do hope he goes to her at some point. But again, I think it might be a case of, her having to step in, her realizing again in another iteration that, okay, something's really, really off. And, I feel that as each iteration goes on, right, from our perspective as audience members, we'll see Ocarina just looking more and more desperate and drained and just heartbroken and all of that, right? And you simply have to assume that Makise is going to keep noticing that in every single iteration, right? And at some point, I think maybe her and maybe a combination of her and Daru might have to step in. Hell, Suzaha is out here as well, of course, right? And that idea that I brought up in the last episode's discussion, it was beginning to feel like maybe, it could be a case of, okay, from enemies to, I almost said lovers, from enemies to allies, right? Maybe even reluctantly, but, from enemies to allies. And I'm speaking of Suzaha and Makise, but then of course, Moeka and the goons came in and flipped everything on its head, right? But now I can kind of almost jump back on that train. You'll have to excuse me. I did. Yeah. So, that idea of them potentially having to, come together, bring their heads together, bring their knowledge together, be a Makise's understanding of these mechanics and Suzaha's knowledge of the future, right? You bring those together, you can get quite the team, right? And then of course you've got Daru as well doing his thing. Listen, one thing's clear, Ocarina is going to need a lot of help. Yes, as the leader of the lab and as this person who feels that, it's his responsibility and his fault that everything ended up on this path and that he has such a major hand in Mayuri's death, right? He must feel so responsible. Imagine the guilt, just crushing guilt. So, it's completely understandable that immediately after seeing Mayuri, die, get shot, and then not just that, Makise getting shot as well, to really pile it on. Yeah, it's understandable, man. It's understandable that, he's not thinking about just being calm about this and sitting down and, again, coming up with a plan of action. I mean, hell, like I said, it's kind of impressive that he isn't even more emotional and unstable, right? His lifelong friend just died, but somehow, the I don't know, that rage that he has from Moeka, just that, guilt that he has, just that feeling of losing Mayuri. That's just driving him, right? It's keeping him going. And of course, that is the first declaration. I'll get you for this, right? And you get that tight shot of his eyes. You get that brilliant voice acting again, right? As the rage and the hatred and the resentment for Kiryu Moeka just flows through him. But yeah, there's actually 2 points here that I need to kind of finish up on before I leave them open-ended and forget to go back to them. So yes, first of all, yes, I do believe that, he could do this for an eternity, and he looks, quite resolved to do that, right? Really focused, really determined, to run it back as many times as he needs to, right? And set things right, put things right to save Mayuri, right? And even that idea of running it back and seeing Mayuri alive, right? Just that right there it must feel incredible. Yes, I saw her die, my mind's been shattered, my world's been shattered, yet at least I'm getting to see her alive here, right? So there's also that aspect of it, I mean, that's a bit, I don't know, a little bit twisted, I suppose, that notion of, he can just keep running it back, and he can keep seeing Mayuri alive, right? You can't put anything past anyone that has lost a loved one in that manner. Let's try to put ourselves in Okarin's shoes. If somehow something like this was possible, you better believe a lot of us are going to run it back. But again, it's a double-edged sword, getting to see them for a bit. You see Okarin certainly gets to see Mayuri and spend more time with Mayuri up until she ends up dying again, right? So it's bittersweet and then some. I mean, bittersweet is understating it. It's you're putting yourself through hell, essentially. And that's Okarin at this point in time. And he's open to it, completely open to it. But ultimately, in these types of narratives, there's always that glimmer of hope, that light at the end of the tunnel, that turning point, right? That breakthrough that I kind of spoke of right at the end of the episode as well. And I firmly believe any type of breakthrough or plan of action, it simply begins with his friends coming in on this, understanding this, Okarin explaining it, right? Even if it's not himself initiating it, but others perhaps like Makise Karisu, really kind of stepping in and trying to help and take control and really kind of get it out of him. That someone like Makise could even end up putting it together, that someone has died, and this is the impact it's having on Okarin, running it back. But again, it's a loop. It'll be a different iteration every single time. So I'm not saying that, Makise Karisu is going to remember every single time, but, you kind of expect or hope that, she'll be picking up on this almost every single time, right? Now, again, the second iteration, Okarin takes more of a level-headed approach, as level-headed as possible in that situation, right? Tries to keep calm and, cooks up a bit of a different story about Mr. Braun coming in, right? And that, they cannot use the lab for a get-together for that party, and they have to leave for the day, right? And then even with Mayuri, he's much more gentle in letting her down, right? It's not a sudden and disappointing and sad cancellation, the approach you see in the first iteration. He's in a state of panic. He is just aggressive and a little bit out of control, out of breath, and he appears to be a little bit scary, right? Mayuri is a little bit scared because of his demeanor and his approach, right? And it kind of took Mayuri's reaction for him to understand and realize that he's scaring her right now. Even more so than usual, as Mayuri said, he's really difficult to understand, right? But something they reiterate twice in both iterations is that Mayuri puts her absolute trust, her complete trust in Okarin, right? That if Okarin is doing this, if he's saying this, even if he seems really crazy, there must be a reason for it, right? There must be a reason for it. And that's not the type of trust that you can have with everyone. That's love, right? And I don't mean in the romantic sense. That is just true friendship. And I saw that incredible flashback at the grave, at Mayuri's grandma's grave, to be a bit more specific. I saw the inception of the Kiyoma persona, right? I saw perhaps it is the first, right? The first Stardust shake hand. I mean, everything about that flashback is heartbreaking, man. Even the pocket watch. It is her grandma's pocket watch. The one that keeps shattering and stopping, right? And getting bloodied up. Yeah, man, it's just, again, evocative imagery in this episode as well. And of course, I'll come back to the flashback in much more detail. But, even there, you see that she really puts her trust in Okarin. I mean, I am on the topic at the moment, the flashback. So let's kind of continue on that and build on that. I mean, there you also kind of see the inception of that fear. I spoke of this in the last episode, the protagonist's, worst fear has been realized. Mayuri has died. And here in this flashback, you really get to see quite a visceral depiction of Okarin's fear of Mayuri being taken away forever, right? And he immediately steps in, takes action. And it is effective, really effective, right? And it's incredibly, incredibly touching and thoughtful because he understood, I don't really need to say too much. It's clear. It's clear cut, right? Okarin saw it as well. He understood that, Mayuri is essentially giving up. She's ready to give up, right? And like you saw, I got rather emotional. I'd say I actually got even more emotional in this episode, right? Because now it really sets in, right? You begin to feel it. And I found myself tearing up throughout this episode at, different moments. There's even that moment earlier on after, again, Suzaha has her moment, takes all those goons out, gets to jump on them. And then, again, there's a bit of a face-off with Moeka. And then, it kind of pans up. It's like a wide shot from above. Again, just being in the lab and just knowing that Mayuri got shot in there, I was kind of beginning to get choked up. And of course, he runs up to her and he holds her and he lets her know, that you have a reason to live. I'm here for you, right? He tells her, I won't let you get taken away. You're my hostage, right? A pledge that you will always have me, right? That was my reading. But, my reading of it was that it's something Mayuri maybe brought up, right? But again, if you kind of look back at it, it doesn't make that much sense for someone to say, I'm your hostage, right? But that was my, running theory on the matter that, it's a pledge, but a pledge between both of them, that indeed they are tied together forever. They'll be together forever, be by each other's side forever, or as long as possible at least, right? Yes, it's a little bit quirky, right? Using the whole hostage and kidnapper aspect of it, but it kind of checks out given how unique these characters are, and how Okarin likes to dabble in that persona. But the thing is, like I said, I see the inception of the Kiyoma persona, and it's brought on for this reason. It's just incredible, isn't it? That he's kept this up for this entire time, right? A decade plus from, it's got to be a decade plus at this point, right? He keeps it up. He keeps it up for Mayuri, right? Yes, I'm sure he gets some enjoyment out of it as well now, now that he's been doing it for so long, but ultimately it's for Mayuri. But the fact that both of them know this television program, that it is a shared reference, she immediately understood, the idea, the concept behind, being a hostage, that you can't leave. You've got to be around. And you see almost immediately there's this shift within Mayuri, right? She understands, she's still got people here. She's got Okarin, right? That she has a reason to stick around. And there's people here still that she matters to, right? Her childhood friend, Okarin. But yeah, how about that, man? To give his friend purpose, to be there for her, to make this depressed child feel just a bit better, right? To help her through this grief, especially difficult given her age as well, right? But to help her through this grief and commit to the bit as long as necessary. And he commits to the bit to this day. But, that being said, you see that it completely falls off in this episode, right? Mayuri's not around, right? Or, in his mind, Mayuri might not be around if he doesn't, figure something out here. And you see in both iterations, sorry, I'm forgetting the name all of a sudden, Ruka is actually rather surprised. Ruka, you see, again, makes sure to correct herself and say Kiyoma, right? She almost said Okabe, but she immediately changes to Kiyoma because, she wants to respect Okarin, right? She wants to, play along. Of course, there's always that crush element at play as well. And you see that a little bit later on in the second iteration, there's a bit of a funny misunderstanding. I mean, to the point that, she's telling Mayuri to be safe, right? She's thinking, they're going off on like a romantic getaway, right? A trip, an outing just, for the two of them. So, in her mind, again, she has no context, whatsoever. In her mind, it's like, oh, this is like a romantic thing. But doesn't that also mean that, people don't completely understand their dynamic, Mayuri and Ocarine, that is? I mean, they know they're, childhood friends. I know that much. But, you see here that Ruka is able to make or misunderstand that, right? That, this actually could be a romantic trip. But of course, from Okarine's perspective and Mayuri's perspective, there's no thought of that. Of course, not from Okarine's perspective, but, from Mayuri's perspective, there's nothing. That thought doesn't occur to her at all. To her, it's legitimately Ocarine just, talking about an outing, a trip, right? And it's sudden. You have to feel for Mayuri, Okarine's like, yeah, they've got to leave right now. And, Mayuri's talking about, not being packed or not having money at the moment. And yeah, it must feel mental from her perspective as well. Yet she goes along, right? Complete trust in Ocarine that he'll explain this. That, yeah, if he's doing this, if he's asking this of me, of course he'll have an explanation for it. But, the thing is, this idea, this notion of the hostage actually developed into a thing that's kind of applied to both of them, right? That it does kind of end up becoming a pledge between the two of them, right? That they'll be together always be by each other's side. You see that Ocarine most definitely needs Mayuri in his life. I've been saying it over and over again. This is his constant, his anchor, right? The person that grounds him, that pulls him out of it, that calls to him. Again, his rope in the maze, his shining light in the darkness, in the pit. So he needs Mayuri just as much as Mayuri needed that at the moment, at the grave, right? And then from that point on as well. So it applies to both of them. Right. And this notion of, Ocarine really needing help now, it kind of goes back to the cold open of episode 1 as well. Not episode 1, episode 12 as well. Right. I mean, listen, I didn't mean to say episode 1, but, if you go back to the beginning of episode 1, there is something really interesting at play there. Right. In terms of who's helping who. And, what's actually truly going on in that scene on the rooftop in the cold open for the last episode. It's Mayuri. Right, who's saying that I've been looking for you, that I've been jumping from timeline, from world line to world line. So yeah, as much as Ocarine feels that he has to take this upon himself, right, and he cannot put anyone else in danger, none of the other lab members, none of his friends in danger, and that, it's his mistakes that he has to fix them, sooner or later he's going to need help. He is going to require help. And ultimately, that's the whole point of it, isn't it? These are his people. He has to bring them in at some point. Or at least he has to be open to it at some point, right? If it's them, be it Makise, be it Daru, be it Susaha, that approach him, right? About the things that he's going through. But yeah, it's certainly a heartbreaking flashback, but, it's full of beautiful moments as well, that immediate shift that Mayuri had at that moment, the sense of belonging, the sense of worth, right? Because of her friend Ocarine, that essentially gave her reason to, keep going, right? A unique approach, but an effective approach, nonetheless, right? An approach from the heart, an approach that felt like the best approach to Ocarine at the time. And again, the art direction, the cinematography, the storyboarding, all of that. It's incredible in that flashback scene, But my goodness, how about that transition? Oh my God. I mean, it's just, this jarring gut punch all of a sudden. You see, it's such a tonal shift. I go from this really emotional moment. I believe I put my hand to my heart. It's just so beautiful. The ending of that flashback to then just to be hit by that gut punch, right? The transition. I mean, listen, it's riveting stuff, because it's haunting, it's horrifying, right? Yet it's this thing that just pulls you in. I mean, I felt like I was just kind of frozen and locked in my seat. I mean, it's such an aggressive dose of reality, right? To shift from that to this. And again, that's deliberate, of course. And it had the intended effect. It certainly had the intended effect on me. it's jarring, yet it's riveting. And stylistically, it is the type of approach I really kind of like, right? The quick cuts and the really cool sound design elements of it, and mixing in the sound mixing aspect of it as well. You get to hear a lot of it in really quick succession. A lot of these moments I've gone through, just Mayuri, the memories of Mayuri, right? And her quirks and all of that. My goodness, that scene, incredible stuff. It's haunting, it's unsettling, right? And those are two things I really quite like as well. But yeah, it's this intense dose of reality, right? Pulling you right back in, bringing both Ocarina and I back to the current state of affairs, right? And that transition, the phone, right? The phone just in a free fall in the darkness, and then actually falling in from the hands of the ocarine that just got the memories, right? The memories of the future. It's such a fantastic tension breaker as well, isn't it? And that officially brought us to August 13th, 4:56 p.m. And you see that this actually did more of a number on him than reading Steiner, right? Reading Steiner is kind of him zoning out, right? Because again, he's taking over an ocarine from a different timeline. He erases that ocarine. He overtakes that ocarine's body, right? Or rather, our ocarine's consciousness takes over another ocarine, right? Overwrites it. So, there's always that section. There's always that, 30 seconds to 40 seconds of him just being in a daze and coming to, right? But this actually felt like it did a bit of a number on him. He's gasping for air. Though, of course, that could be related to him having those memories of Mayuri as well, right? But yeah, ultimately it felt a bit more aggressive and intense and intrusive even in comparison to the D-mail reading Steiner moments of Ocarine, right? Of him actually jumping to a different timeline and not being erased, or his memory not being reconstructed. But see, here's the thing, this kind of reminds me, this idea of consciousness. See, the thing is, it's being presented as Ocarine, or the Ocarine I knew, his consciousness actually jumping here. But I know that's not the case. It's the memories. But it's not. Yeah, you see, I'm kind of hung up on this. Because if it's not the consciousness, that means that still exists in that future from a few hours from now. But that's not possible. It's just not. You can't have this ocarine being conscious and the one that us, the audience, is getting to see now, and then there's one that's still around in a few hours from now, right? The one I saw put on the headphone, the one I've been following since day one, essentially, the one who time-leapt. Okay, I think I kind of just have to break it down and try to simplify it. That cannot happen anymore. The events cannot play out in that manner anymore because that ocarine has time-leapt, and now this is that ocarine's present. But even though, again, it's just the memories that are being sent back. Okay, let's kind of put that aside for now and kind of continue on this train of thought. That cannot happen anymore in that manner. Just the fact that Ocarine has time-leapt and now acted on the information that he's received, the memories of the future, now that he's acted on it and, the trajectory has changed, that specific moment does not exist anymore. It cannot exist anymore in that order, essentially. The stuff that played out in, I suppose it's one of many infinite iterations, but it's the same timeline, right? So here, I think it's actually beginning to feel a bit more traditional, right? Traditional in the sense that, okay, now that he's actually acting on the information he has from the future, memories of the future, he is changing it. So I suppose maybe, again, there's no reading Steiner taking place, but maybe it just automatically is reconstructing everything to actually match the new trajectory that this ocarine is putting into motion now, because he's acting on the information he has from the future, right? Memories of the future. And now, of course, as he acted on those things, there's at least 2 iterations that I've seen now, right? Different trajectories. So I'm going to go ahead and assume that since it is on the same timeline, it just automatically changes the things that happen in the future to align with this, the new trajectory that he's put into motion based on the information that he's received from the future. And I don't really think there's any misdirect at play here. That, Ocarine might be confused about the timeline not changing, the world line not shifting and being reconstructed. I think that's exactly how it is. It didn't change because any changes that are happening because he's able to follow a bit of a roadmap, right? He knows exactly where to go and who to call, even though it's proving to be rather frustrating at first, right? Because he's simply not able to get a hold of Mayuri until he is able to get a hold of her later at night, later in the evening, right? At the sighting of the first star once again. But once again, I'm kind of thinking about this idea of the memories, a copy of the memories, being accessed, right? Or the possibility of it being accessed by other means at some point in the story, perhaps, right? Is it just locked in and a given that, if it's not the exact same person, right? Neurologically and all of that, it's just not going to function. It's just not going to happen, right? The time leap is just going to be a dead end. Or can you access that copy somehow, right? In another capacity? I think that could be an interesting development. Maybe later in the anime, in the story, right? Could you implant those memories of the future into someone else? Could someone else receive those memories? That could be an interesting idea, I think. That is another interesting approach I have seen before. So that could be something. You never know. But yeah, as I was experiencing that episode, I was beginning to think about stuff like source code, the edge of tomorrow, right? Again, Desmond Hume from Lost. There's a lot of striking similarities to many of those time travel narratives or, time travel mechanics. That idea, that concept of being stuck in a loop, but also remembering every single iteration or your past attempts in every single iteration. And then, of course, applying that knowledge, that trial and error, all of that to your next attempt. I'm certainly about to see something quite similar on display here as well in Steins Gate. It certainly feels like it, and it certainly looks like it already. But, I'm going to focus a bit more on Lost, on Desmond Hume. So spoilers in 3, 2, 1, now. I'm talking about Lost. Last chance. Spoilers. So Desmond Hume, right? He has something really similar happen to him. And I am speaking of Charlie. He knows, he understands that Charlie is meant to die, or he is going to die, and he tries his best. For a time, he tries his best to prevent that from happening, right? And he's successful. He is. But, every single time he's successful, it's almost as if, okay, yeah, you dodged it this time, but then another attempt, then another attempt. It's not something he could bypass. He can just delay, right? So something similar appears to be happening here, right? At least at this point, it appears that he's not able to bypass it, right? And that's the trick, isn't it, ultimately, that he's going to have to somehow bypass it enough that this moment doesn't end up being this important fixed moment. But again, that's for a bit later, I suppose, speculation on that, this idea of bypassing it. Because, that's something that's already kind of at play, or it's been introduced, right? This idea of, wanting to bypass or needing to bypass. But, that's associated with John Teeter, aka most likely our Amane Susaha, and this idea of causing enough deviation to bypass that dystopian future. But see, that being said, I keep having this really sad thought that, maybe this might not be one of those things that can be bypassed, much like Charlie. That Desmond could delay it, but ultimately, he understood that no matter how many times I delay it, it's as if the universe demands it. That, ultimately it does course correct, and you are going to keep finding yourself in situations, where you are meant to die, and you are ultimately going to die, right? But see, the key there is that Desmond straight up just tells him, and of course, it took some convincing from Charlie himself, right? He asked about this, and he really wanted to know. And ultimately, Charlie decided that he'll accept it, right? That this is fate, and this is how he's meant to go, right? And he embraced it, and he essentially goes out a hero, playing his part, doing his part, right? Of course, I'm speaking of the iconic moment, I suppose one of the most iconic moments in television history, not Penny's boat, right? Puts his hand up, and Desmond gets to see it. Could it get to a point, where Ocarine might ultimately have to bring Mayuri in on this and just let her know, right? I mean, I think it's not something that could happen easily, for him to tell Mayuri that this is how things play out, and no matter how long he tries or how many times he tries, she still ends up dying, right? But it's an interesting idea, interesting possibility to think about how Mayuri would kind of react to that, right? Could she be even accepting of that, perhaps? But then again, it kind of goes all the way back to this idea from the last episode as well, in the discussion portion of it. And here in the beginning of this portion as well, that, people like perhaps Moeka and certainly people like Suzuha, our time traveler, must or might understand that, Mayuri dying is unfortunately a necessity here, right? Because of the things it puts into motion, perhaps the trajectory and all of that. Hell, maybe there's even an element of the trajectory that it puts Okrin on, as harsh as it sounds, that this is the thing that's needed, right? But maybe there could be different perspectives on that, because if you look at it from CERN's perspective, maybe they need Ocarine to go down this path, to experience this, and because of experiencing this, something comes out of it, perhaps. I just kind of keep thinking back to Suzuha. She left, and there's a good chance she knew that Mayuri is going to die in there, and then she shows up, right? Of course, she shows up after Mayuri died. Then she jumps in, right? So it could be a calculated thing, as difficult as it might have been, right? Now, again, I don't know for sure that she actually, held off running back in there until Mayuri died, but it kind of feels like that, doesn't it? Is it just a coincidence that she just missed it, that she didn't come in time to stop this from happening, right? Because it's clear that she always meant to come back. And of course, it's not going to take her that long, right, to get downstairs and turn it on. I mean, she ran, right? So it's possible that she had it done almost immediately. She had it turned on almost immediately. And then, she gets the jump on them. But, kind of looking at other possibilities and, out of moments of desperation, is it possible that he could turn to D-mail again? But see, here's the thing. I think even D-mail is not going to be able to bypass this, right? But, if you kind of look at it, if you try to look at it from Okrine's perspective, try to, put yourself in his shoes, as I am trying at the moment. Again, in moments of desperation, once, he keeps going through this, he might reach a point that he might be open to trying everything and anything, even though he understands that there's just not that much control with D-mail, right? And that ultimately the time leap is this, a step up, right? It is an improvement, a natural improvement on the D-mail phenomenon as well, right? Though again, like I say, the idea that you have any control even over something like this, it's futile, isn't it? But in comparison, perhaps just a tad bit more control than the D-mail phenomenon, right? There, it really truly is out of your hands, the butterfly effect. But, that being said, I'm most definitely expecting to see reading Steiner take place again at some point. And then, of course, the things that are attached to reading Steiner, and that being that number, the divergence number. But of course, once he comes to, he's really kind of out of it. And both, Daru and Makise are a little bit surprised about his attitude, the shift in his attitude all of a sudden. But then again, almost as expected, Makise kind of puts it together then and there. And then later she calls him up as well, right? He runs into Suza. No, okay, now I'm thinking about the second time, or hold on. The first time or the second time? Did he run into Suzuha in the first iteration or the second? Yeah, he ran into Suzuha in the first iteration that I see in this, the first time he time-leapt in this, right? Yeah, in the streets, in the alley, she asked about a specific place, and he said, go ask a policeman, and that she's meant to take Nai to a mall. And, Ocarine told her, stay out as long as possible. Don't come back here, right? So Nai and Suzuha are out of the picture there. And then, of course, he finds Mayuri in the street, the first star sighting of the night. And then, he tries to explain, after just really bamboozling her and confusing the hell out of her and scaring her even, they end up going to the station. And, there you see that he's so annoyed that he messed up, that he slipped up, right? that he wasn't able to remember that detail, that crucial information that indeed, because of the bomb threat, everything's canceled or delayed, at least for now. And again, in this iteration, they do catch up to him. The guy comes up right behind him, and they make a run for it. Mayuri gets separated from Okarin, and then, of course, Kiryu Moeka runs her over, and then, she kind of slips up there, doesn't she? Okabe-kun, she almost said that, but then she tries to remain a bit more professional. Okabe Rintaro has been captured, or he's been secured, something along those lines, right? That they have him, right? Or they had him for a moment, at least, before he kicks the one guy off and somehow makes it all the way back to his lab and time leaps again. There is something a little strange going on there as well, I think. But again, like I say, I think it's actually kind of impressive how well Okarin has kind of taken this, again, given the situation and the things he's experienced, because in his second attempt, his second iteration, he's already, taking things into account, right? Taking a different approach already, right? Be it with Makise and Daru inside of the lab, and then, with Mayuri specifically, right? And most importantly, because, at the shrine, like I said, he made sure to really kind of, tone it down a bit, be a bit more tactful and gentle about his approach, a bit more sensitive about Mayuri's feelings this time round. That it's been postponed, right? Meaning that, it can still happen. It'll happen someday, as, they tell each other at the platform before Nai accidentally launches Mayuri in front of the train. And my goodness, that shot of her silhouette, in front of the train, they're making sure that they show us all of this, right? They're putting us through the ringer, man. And even a split moment before that, there's a shot of Okarin, right? Almost kind of like frozen in his spot, frozen in time, almost about to do a side eye. And then, it switches to a shot of his hand, helpless Okarin, right? It happened so instantly that he couldn't even move. And of course, in the immediate aftermath of that death, he's just completely speechless, just bamboozled. And, he really is in shock for a moment, right? And it's beautifully animated as well. The storyboarding there is fantastic as well. As painful as it might be for Okarin at that point, you see the zooming lights of the train across his face. At one point he's kind of being lit up as this outlier, if you will, right? He's glowing in comparison to everyone else in the background. And the thing is, for a split moment, if you look at my reaction, I actually thought, come on, you've got to be kidding me. If Moeka steps out of that train, because they kind of focus on the exit, on the doors as it's slowing down, and you see the angle of the shot itself, the camera is pointed towards the ground. So if it opens and people walk out, you're going to see the shoes or the boots. I thought maybe I'm about to see something like that. I really would have lost my shit if that happened, if she stepped out of it. But yeah, once again, right before it happens, her pocket watch stops, right? Yeah, just kind of reiterates that idea that, her time is always going to be up, always. That ultimately it is the end of the line for Mayuri, right? Here at the train station in this iteration, how about that? And as the train approaches, there is a sense of unease. Why is it making such a big deal of the train approaching? And then the sound design kicks in, there's something really off-putting about that. And then as Nai runs in, it's the same music they used for Moeka's entrance in the last episode, right? So it begins to put you in the same mood, in the same mindset that, oh God, okay, there's it's building and it's building, right? And isn't it crazy that the tension breaker ends up being the horn of the train right after Mayuri gets run over? Oh God, it just feels so strange to even say that out loud. And again, to go back to the final moments of that episode, focusing on the time code itself and, really zooming in that tight shot of it, it almost hits 8 p.m., doesn't it? Again, 8 is kind of common in these types of time travel narratives, right? Because 8 really kind of resembles the infinity symbol. But I thought it was interesting that it doesn't actually hit 8, right? And then the time begins to run back, right? That visual depiction of it, that, confirmation that indeed, Okarin is going to attempt this over and over again. But isn't it interesting? I think it's interesting that it didn't hit 8. And maybe I'm overthinking this, but, the fact that, 8 does kind of represent the infinity symbol as well, I thought it was at least something worth noting or mentioning, that it didn't hit 8. But yeah, this idea of a transfer of, in this case, memories, but it's still kind of functioning as a transfer of consciousness, right? From the looks of it, because it's, that's a character that I'm following still. It's not as if I've left the Ocarina that I was following this entire time all of a sudden, and now I'm following an Ocarina a little bit from the past that has the memories of the Ocarina that I've been following, right? So I don't know. I'm a little bit hung up on that. Maybe I'll just kind of hang back and I'll get my answers. But, for the purpose of this point, a transfer of consciousness, right, to a previous point in time. Again, I've brought up examples: Days of the Future Past, Edge of Tomorrow, Lost, right, and Source Code as well. Another example, it's a great film. It might not be for everyone, but I really enjoyed that. No shocker there, of course. But the idea there is that, again, every single iteration, trial and error, right? It's tough, of course. It's tough to go through it, but if you're a part of it now, you're part of this loop, that you have to go through this loop, you've got to just learn and adapt, right? Trial and error, apply it to the next iteration and exhaust every single possibility, I suppose. But, the thing is, there's infinite amounts of possibilities. So, how do you balance that, right? As far as his state of mind is concerned. I mean, how many times can Ocarina truly experience the death of his close friend? That is not normal, right? Even if okay, you're going to get another shot to go back, right? And try it again. I mean, it's real. In the moment, it's real. He's seeing, he's feeling all these things happening. He's seeing Mayuri die. There's no pleasant death. That has to do a number on a person. It simply does. So, that has to be taken into account as well, how it's going to affect him. But let's kind of shift the focus to Moeka and the IBN 5100, because something is not quite adding up here, right? Much like how, those messages that Ocarina was receiving, the heads up about, knowing too much, the decapitated doll head and the red jello, and then CERN bamboozling them anyways, something is a bit off. Something's not quite adding up there either. Why give him a heads up before you're going to bamboozle him and raid him? I've always felt that, or it really was beginning to feel like someone is actually potentially looking out for him there. That hell, maybe even could be a future Ocarina looking out for his past self, trying to help, trying to guide perhaps his past self, or, anyone else from his friend group, right? Because they're all in on it, on the time travel aspect of it. They understand it. I mean, ultimately, I do believe it is someone that I know, right? From this ensemble cast. I don't think it's just some random from CERN that is messaging him. I just don't think, I don't think that's the case. But yeah, if you think about Moeka's search, her hunt for the IBN 5100, and now that it's been confirmed that she is a part of CERN, CERN must have their own IBN 5100s, right? Surely, of course they do. They can track down IBN 5100s. This isn't the only one that exists, right? They've never said that this is the only one that exists out here in the context of this story. So does that mean that there is actually a distinction here? That, FB and CERN are maybe not completely connected? See, that's the thing. She's been confirmed to be with CERN as well in the last episode, right? Officially at that point. I mean, I certainly flirted with the idea of it potentially even being Moeka herself, right? Messaging, again, in this specific case, a future Moeka, or a Moeka that's, privy to time travel mechanics and has access to it, perhaps, that she's the one actually messaging herself. But again, that's quite a bridge to cross, right? A bit far-fetched. But ultimately, I think it's definitely someone from the cast. It has to be. I'm really not expecting new characters at this point. I'm beyond the midpoint, and it's been firmly established. The direction for the rest of the story, perhaps, it's been established at this point. Maybe I might see a new face or two, right? New surroundings and all of that, if possible. But As far as major characters go, I think I've probably seen all of them already. And yes, maybe I'll see older versions of current cast members, but that still doesn't really count as a new character. But then, I have to keep in mind that, indeed, CERN rules time travel with an iron fist, right? They monopolized it, according to John Teeter. So that right there automatically just means that they made it so no one else should be able to dabble with time travel, right? And so naturally, I suppose, they would want to hoard anything that's kind of related to time travel, and monopolize that as well. And I suppose IBM 5100 also fits that description, right? Because the IBM 5100 does have some role to play in time travel, right? But see, I say that, but then it was kind of corrected for me, and it was brought to my attention that they didn't actually need it. It was just something they did in the anime, but didn't do in the original, right? In the game. They didn't actually need the IBM 5100 to really crack the code and really get in there and, read in detail the Jellyman's report. That kind of came from the confusion that they caused, that the anime itself caused, of them not having the IBM 5100 anymore because, in that situation, because of Moika's D-mail, it's gone. It's gone missing, right? Though, a couple of episodes ago, Moika is really, really quite upset. At one point, Ocarine runs her down, runs after her, and she's on the floor, just flustered and just incredibly, frustrated and sad that it wasn't there. And she said something really interesting. FB said it would be there, right? And by there, you have to assume she means the shrine, right? So Moika sends her D-mail, again, detailing the location most likely, and then it plays out, and then I see that, the outcome of it. But, again, the confusion came from the fact that Makise still knows about the details of the Jellyman's report, even after they didn't have the IBM 5100. So I don't know if this is going to cause any future issues, right? Any plot holes. I'll just have to see. Because clearly the 5100 is still important. But yeah, it became clear in the last episode, but this certainly locks it in, right? This appears to be it. All that brilliant build-up and setup, the foundational elements that are part of the first, 11 episodes led to this. And because of those foundational elements, the really impressive execution of those foundational elements, this is that much more effective and affecting, right? Those episodes are so crucial. But yeah, as far as all of that setup, be it the cast dynamics, the interpersonal relationship dynamics, right? The time travel mechanics, the major players, right? CERN, Future Gadgets Lab, and all those members, the Labo members, John Teeter, Suzaha, Moika, Reading Steiner, Time Leap, all of that stuff, right? It's been firmly established at this point. But yeah, at some point, Ocarine simply has to ask for help. He has to just go to someone like Suzaha, right? Go to someone like Makise. They'll help him, man. Suzaha will do everything to help him. But I do know it's not going to come easy to Ocarine to ask for help, right? To bring them in. But I think it's inevitable. It needs to happen, right? Like I said, these are his people, Surround yourself with your people, plan and execute, and see how it plays out, man. It's a really tricky situation to go through by yourself. But yeah, I think that should do it for this one, folks, as Ocarine finds himself at the edge of tomorrow, right? As the time begins to run back, right before it hits 8 p.m. But yeah, man, I'm just so incredibly excited for the things to come. And if you enjoyed this, consider dropping a like, consider dropping some comments. Give me your thoughts. If you are interested in early access to the next few episodes right now, multiple episodes unlocked immediately, or full opacity, or timer-based full length, consider checking out the Patreon page and potentially supporting the channel in the process. As well, the links are in the description and the pinned comment. Also links to social media, if that's your thing. Right then, thank you so much for joining me, folks, and thank you for your time, because time is precious. And I do hope to see you again soon for episode 14. Until then, take it easy.